sports fans. Hanna Barton, joined by Brenden Schaeffer. And today we've got your 2025 Tennessee Volunteers. Buckle up, Brenden, because we're starting off with what is going on in that quarterback room down in Knoxville. You had the drama earlier in the year with the departure of your starting quarterback. Now you've got quarterbacks being blurred out on school social media. So, what do we think is happening in this Tennessee locker room?
Yeah, Nico leaves, and I think it's just safest for me to call him Nico and not mess up any pronunciations. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. He leaves. He says, hey, I want the bag. His family says, hey, I want the bag for my son, whatever the case was. And Tennessee's like, bridge too far. Did you see your performance against Ohio State? Like, we're not doing this. And so they draw the line in the sand. What that means is he leaves and goes to UCLA, and it's basically a quarterback trade in college football. You talk about the professionalizing of college athletics. This is a great example where Joey Aguilar comes in. He was going to be the guy at UCLA. Doesn't end up happening. But now, as this camp is unfolding, you mentioned it, there have been blurred out images and videos from camp where they don't even want to tell you who's practicing with the ones. I don't think that's a good sign at this point for Tennessee. It'll probably still be Aguilar, but I don't know that they're very confident in what they're going to get from the QB spot this year.
Yeah, you've got Aguilar, you got the redshirt freshman, and Jake Merklinger for quarterback. Obviously, they lose a huge piece of their running game and Dylan Sampson, so they need to replace that. And we don't know who the quarterback is, so we don't know if they're going to be someone that can really, contribute to a part of the run game. You talked about the blurring out, throwing an interception on the Twitter. So what do you think we can even expect from Tennessee this season offensively?
I think it's going to be up and down. I think there are going to be moments of their season where Aguilar's my prediction as to who comes in, but it's kind of like he was thrust upon them, because when you think about when the Nico stuff happened, there was not a lot of action, right, in the portal. A lot of it had already taken place, and so you're kind of almost only stuck with the guy that had his starting job taken away by Nico going to UCLA. That was just like by default who they probably had to take, which doesn't mean that they're overly excited about him. I think he's probably still going to be the starter anyway. That being said, whether he is or he isn't, you're going to have inconsistencies with this offense. The good news, if you're Tennessee, is I do believe, and we'll talk more about it when we come up to their schedule, it's one of the easier schedules, if not the easiest schedule in the SEC, specific to what you're trying to accomplish, though. I'll explain what I mean by that. Missouri was rated to have the easiest schedule, and I think there's some truth to that, but there may be an easier way for Tennessee to get to like a 9-3 specifically, and then just have a way to win one of those questionable games and maybe get to a 10th win. I think their schedule is such that they're going to be able to weather some of the inconsistencies when it comes to that quarterback play and that offense, because I just don't think they have enough hard games for it to really hurt them, other than the few games in which you're just going to have to show up and maybe be better than somebody who's on your plane, on your level. We'll see what they're going to do. But I think, like, defensively, the quarterback stuff doesn't impact that. And I think they've got a really good defense that they're returning. I think they're going to be pretty much the requisite expectations for what Tennessee typically does. They might get bailed out by the schedule this year, but there's also a lot of questions that, even with an easy schedule, you could say it's easy, but by SEC standard, that still means there's some pitfalls.
Yeah, and as we've been going through these SEC previews, some of those games where these teams are playing Tennessee, we have actually kind of leaned towards the other team just because of, okay, what about
Right.
the inconsistencies in the offense? You mentioned the defense having a little bit more of a consistency. Of course, they've got McCoy back as their star on defense. He was a preseason All-American. He is recovering from a torn ACL, so we'll have to see how he is health-wise. I think Arion Carter and Boo Carter, obviously huge returners in that defense, but again, you don't just have drama on the offensive side of the ball. You have it in defense too, with apparently Boo Carter has been missing practices and summer workouts, and his mom's been online talking about different things. So as I'm looking at this, the other thing I'm questioning is how much does Josh Heupel really have the control of that locker room in Knoxville?
Thank you. Thank you. Like that, like if it happens once, you're like, okay, that's a weird thing. I don't know what Nico was thinking, but he's going to have to go on to greener pastures. But like now it's happening on the other side of the ball, and maybe it's a couple of isolated incidents, right? But the more things that stack up, the more you go, I'm beginning to question Josh Heupel 100%. I think Josh Heupel is a good coach. Don't think he's a great one. I think he's more middle of the pack, honestly, across the SEC. He's had some really good seasons, but I also think he's got some of the best resources in the conference when it comes to what they make available to him at Tennessee. So this could go off the rails in an unbelievable way. If you're talking about having strife on the defensive side of the ball, which they were one of the best defenses in the country last year, top 10 in yards per game across NCAA, they're probably going to be really good again this year. But if some of those cracks begin to form and it happens on both sides of the ball, and you find one loss that shouldn't be there that ends up popping up, and if it happens early, that's where things could get really, really interesting and not in a good way for the Vols this season.
Taking a look at this schedule for the Tennessee Volunteers, win total sitting at 8.5. And Brenden, you said earlier in the show that you think that they may have the easiest schedule in the SEC.
Yeah, I understand that there are a couple of games here that are more difficult than anything that Missouri has, because Tennessee has to go to Alabama, where Missouri gets Alabama at home. That's obviously the biggest one that jumps out. And Missouri does not have to play Georgia, whereas Tennessee does. And so for that reason, Missouri grades out overall as the easiest schedule. However, I think Tennessee's is actually an easier schedule to go at least 9-3 on, because in my opinion, they almost roll out of bed at 9-3. Syracuse is their non-con power team. That's a game that they should for sure win. East Tennessee, UAB are some of the other non-cons. You have New Mexico State later on. And you look at where the home games fall. Yes, Georgia's going to be tough no matter where you play them. But otherwise, you get Arkansas. That's pretty good. You get Vanderbilt. I know that's a rivalry game, but the expectation there is going to be to win it if you're Tennessee. You get Oklahoma at home this time, which I think is a nice benefit to them. There are 3 real games on the schedule that I find difficult, because when you look at the road games, having Mississippi State and Kentucky as 2 of your 4 road games is the easiest thing you could have this year in the SEC. Those are the bottom 2 teams in the conference, in my opinion. And if you're going to have to play somebody on the road, which every team does, you got to play 4 times on the road, you're going to have to play those teams, and you're going to probably say thank you for it. Arkansas at home, that's a game that you probably win. Here's the games I circle on their schedule that are going to be the toss-ups. It's at Alabama, it's hosting Georgia, and it's at Florida. Those are tough. I don't know that the Tennessee Vols are going to be favored in any of those games, but they're all going to be close. They're all going to be close to a coin flip at least. You just got to win one of them, because I don't know, Hanna, where's the loss on this schedule that's not coming against Georgia, against Bama, or against the Florida Gators? Maybe hosting Oklahoma, because Oklahoma does have a pretty improved team this year, but I just think they roll out of bed with 9. And that's why I think, honestly, if you're hoping to get to 9, it's an easier way to get there than what Missouri faces with their schedule. If you're trying to get to 10, though, you're going to have to pick off somebody that I think you're going to be an underdog in all 3 of those games.
I think I'm going to make a little bit of a bold prediction here. I don't know if
Okay.
Tennessee fans are going to be happy with me, but
Uh-oh.
I don't think that Syracuse game opening up the season is going to be as
Oh!
easy as everybody thinks.
All
I
right.
think that they're still trying to get their feet on the ground. I think that Syracuse is going to come down. They're going to enjoy playing outside in some warm weather. And I think that one's going to be, I don't think it's going to be a gimme. I think Tennessee could very well win it, but I think it's going to be a little bit tougher than maybe SEC fans or even Tennessee fans are thinking. But the other thing about this schedule is they are blocked out in certain ways favorably. I mean, you got East Tennessee State at home. Okay, foot off the gas. You have Georgia, foot goes back on the gas. Then you have UAB, foot comes off. Then you go to Mississippi State, foot can come off. That's another game where I think, if we're talking about an upset, Mississippi State upsetting
Whoa.
Tennessee. I mean,
If that
how the
happens.
Bulldogs, now I don't think that one's going to happen, but if you're talking
Right.
about a loss that could come out of nowhere, that could be one. I think Arkansas, I think they're going to be able to handle them with it being at home.
Yeah.
Obviously, going to Alabama is just tough. Kentucky's, like we said, one of the most manageable road games. I think Oklahoma is going to be a good one. And then you get a little break with New Mexico State. Going to Florida, I think, is going to be outside of going to Alabama. I actually think that going to Florida might be their toughest road challenge, because Florida and Tennessee do not like each other. In my mind, the Florida and Tennessee rivalry is almost the same as that Florida Georgia. I mean, those are just 2
Yeah.
teams in the SEC that have always butted heads, and I think it's going to be a charged game, and then they're to go right from one charged game to the other as they get to host Vanderbilt. I think hosting Vanderbilt is going to be really good for them. Depending on where those teams are sitting at, depending on what Diego Pavia has got in store for Vanderbilt, we'll see. But I think there's going to be a couple games on here, depending on where this quarterback situation ends up, that may upset some Tennessee fans with the result.
If they lose, and they're going to lose to Georgia, I know it's a home game, but I don't think they have the talent, especially at the quarterback position, to beat them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can get things up and running, but that's an early game where when you're installing a new quarterback and a new offense, there's some concern with that. You do have that offensive minded head coach that hopefully can guide things, but like we said, how confident are we in the way that Josh Heupel is guiding things behind the scenes right now? If they lose to Syracuse or Mississippi State, which they're favored by a couple touchdowns against Syracuse, it'll be the same thing on the road against Mississippi State. That's the crack in the armor that I would be talking about, where like things would go legitimately off the rails. They're going to go 6-6, and Heupel's going to lose his job. Like that, those types of losses would be panic mode type of losses. But I'll say Tennessee wins them both. They'll beat UAB. They'll beat East Tennessee. I think I'm going to give Georgia the Georgia game. And so you're talking about 4-1. Don't slip up to Arkansas at home, 5-1. Like their schedule starting off is so easy outside of that Georgia game that if they're anything less than 5-1, you got some significant problems going into that Alabama game. But even if that's the case, like I think Alabama's going to beat Tennessee, so that's 5-2. But then it's Kentucky. Like it's kind of weird to me looking at the win total at DraftKings Sportsbook that it's 8.5 with plus 125 odds on the over. So they're like favored to go under 8.5 if you trust those odds. I think that's more about the internal strife right now with Tennessee and the quarterback situation than anything to do with their schedule. If they slip up though, like it's going to be a game that they are really, really wishing they didn't slip up against, because those first 8 are just, they should be 7-1. Remember that 6-2. They should 100% be 6-2 going into Oklahoma. But if they're not, there's no way they're sniffing this 8.5 win total. I want to take under, but their schedule is so easy. It would be crazy to think that they might go under. I guess I should count the Oklahoma game as one that you can't roll out of bed and win. But even if they lost to Florida, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Georgia, I mean, that's 8-4 to win the other ones. It's such an easy schedule to get to 8 or 9 wins that it's hard to imagine they might not do it. But you're right. Like if they overlook any one of those early opponents, they could end up in some trouble.
Before I get your final prediction on the win total, what do you think this team's going to need to be sitting at heading into that latter part of the schedule, the Oklahoma, New Mexico State, Florida, Vanderbilt stretch, in order for Heupel to be pretty secure in his job?
Yeah, I think they'll be 6-2 at least, and if they are, then he'll be fine. Like if he goes 8-4 this year, I don't think he's on the hot seat, and so it would have to be a true collapse where you lose to Syracuse or Mississippi State or Arkansas, and then you don't win any of the games where you're a coin flip in, and then suddenly you're like, whoa, Tennessee really blew it with that quarterback thing, huh? They should have probably paid him the money because they went 6-6 or 7-5, and then there's some bigger conversations that are happening if that happens.
All right, lock it in. What is your final win prediction for the Tennessee Vols for 2025?
Oh, there's so many easy games, but I don't think they're very good. They're going to lose to Georgia. They're going to lose to Bama. I think they're going to lose to Florida. So there's 9. Can I find? And they're probably going to slip up once. Yeah, give me under on this win total. Give me 8-4. I think their schedule is as manageable as it will ever be to get to at least 9 wins. And I say even then they're not going to do it, which tells you why I am a little bit concerned about the state of what's going on in Knoxville right now. 8-4. I'm locking it in.
Well, we'll see how Tennessee fans feel about that. And of course, how they feel as the season progresses down in Knoxville. We'll continue to keep you updated on them and all your other teams in the SEC. But for now, that's your preview of the 2025 Tennessee Volunteers.